Here I am again to talk to you about emotions. Last time I spoke about one emotion, which is anxiety, the anxiety that can so often arise with uncertainty. But today I'm going to go a little bit deeper into emotions and particularly into uncertainty, because uncertainty is part of vulnerability. And yes, while so many of us may be feeling anxious, uncertain, ultimately we have all been thrust into a situation in which we all feel to a certain extent vulnerable. Whether that is about our job, whether that is about the living situation that we find ourselves in, or just simply having to manage all of the emotions that come with the situation that we're in. It's a vulnerable time, and that is tricky. So I thought I'd jump in here and talk to you a little bit about vulnerability from the work of Brene Brown, which I have done my training in, Brene Brown's Dare to Lead work. So vulnerability, by her definition, is risk, uncertainty, and emotional exposure. And so, haven't we got all of those three things right now? Absolutely risk, very much so uncertainty, and emotional exposure, because we are all in a situation that is hard to contain in terms of our emotions. And so we are all feeling exposed in terms of those emotions being expressed. Certainly for me, for the majority of this week, I felt fairly calm and fairly relaxed about the situation. But yesterday that all came to a head, and I had a real moment of emotional exposure in terms of my vulnerability. And there was a little bit of rage, and there were a few tears, and it was a roller coaster, really. And so, in this state of vulnerability, which we are all in, how do we manage our emotions? How do we manage our vulnerability? Well, the clearest predictor of courage in times like this is our ability to lean into vulnerability, to accept it and ourselves exactly as we are, exactly as our emotions arise, to be with them and to accept them without judgment. That is such a key part of leaning into vulnerability and moving through these feelings that we're having. Ultimately, in terms of one key word or one key practice we can put in place and offer to others who are vulnerable, just as vulnerable as we are, is empathy. And there are four key elements of empathy as described again by Brene Brown, and I'm going to talk to you about each of these now just briefly. The first is perspective taking. So many people think of empathy as in, stand in someone else's shoes. Well, it's not exactly it. It's really impossible to stand fully and completely in someone else's shoes. But what we can do is connect to the emotion of the experience that they are in. So try to take their perspective and connect to the emotion underpinning the experience that they are having. So that's the first thing, perspective taking. The second is to stay out of judgment. And I mentioned that just before. So easy to look at other people and judge them for their response to this situation, because it may not be the same as your response. But so important, if we're to be truly empathetic, to stay out of judgment. Notice how people are, how they're responding, but without attaching to that. So don't judge them for who they are or how they are during this time. The third thing is to recognize emotion and be able to communicate it. Now that's hard. Apparently there are over 40 different emotions that researchers have identified that humans experience, and yet most of us can recognize just three. We may call these different things, but an easy way to remember them is sad, mad, and glad. So for many of us at this time, we may be feeling an element of sadness or an element of madness, anger, frustration, lots of different ways that you can describe anger and sadness too. Things like worry, fear, uncertainty, nervousness is often underpinning sadness. And so what I would suggest that you do is, if you notice yourself feeling sad, tearful, or mad, angry, rage, or if you notice that in anyone else, just stop, notice without judgment how they are, or how you yourself I should say, and then maybe go a little bit deeper. So try to connect to the emotion beneath or underpinning that experience. So is it really sadness, or is there something else deeper underneath that sadness that's going on? Is it really madness or anger, or is there something else deeper underneath there that's going on? Really try to take the time to get to know your emotions and other people's emotions better. In this time, we need to get sophisticated with our emotional intelligence. And, the way to do that is: Step 1, perspective taking. Step 2, stay out of judgment. Step 3, really try to get present with and go deeper in understanding your emotion. And the way to do this is step 4, which is mindfulness. So mindfulness is simply present moment, non-judgmental awareness. So when you start to feel a certain way, or if you have been feeling a certain way, stop. Be still with that emotion or those emotions. Allow yourself to see them. Allow those emotions and yourself to be seen by others. And talk to those other people in your bubble, in your home. So I'll give you an example from myself, my own experience yesterday with this. As I said, was feeling pretty calm and pretty relaxed throughout the whole week with what's been going on, thinking I had all the tools and I would be just fine. But, when you're giving out so much of yourself, for example, the videos and the audios that I've been recording, holding the space for my husband to work at home, holding the space for my children to do their learning and play from home, that is a lot of energy, it is a lot of effort, it's a lot of patience. And so that all came to a head yesterday, and I did feel a certain amount of rage, and I did feel tears start to come, and I did hold them at bay, but they were very much there just beneath the surface. And so I paused and really asked myself, what's going on here? And what it is, or what it was linked to my values. So I've done a lot of work on values, and perhaps that's another video for us. But one of my core values is independence. And of course, I've lost all independence, or not all, but so much independence, as so many of us have. This real feeling of a lack of freedom. And what I realized yesterday was that has really affected me, because I value it so highly. To not be able to live into this value really has affected my sense of centeredness, I suppose. I'm not aligned with that value. I'm not living in integrity with that value, and that kind of untethered me a little bit, and that's where some of that kind of anger and rage and then sadness came from. So because I could sit with myself, go deeper, and really understand with sophistication what was going on for me, I was then able to talk to my husband and say, I just need help. I need to get out of the house. I need to go for a walk. I'm going to book an online yoga class and do it in the morning, which I did this morning, so I'm feeling so much better for that. But then to be able to have that conversation with him and share what I'm understanding of myself and how I'm processing the situation that I and we all are in, means that, what do they say? A problem shared is a problem halved, or whatever the saying is. And so again, I can pull that support network and support system around me, and in that way also feel more centered and more grounded, and ultimately more safe, less vulnerable. So I hope that has helped you a little bit in terms of 4 steps to practicing empathy, which is one tool that we can use, one behavior that we can practice to help us through these big emotions that so many of us are having right now. And as always, as I've promised over the last week, I will continue to produce these as and when I have experiences that I feel are useful to share with you. And also as I read and reread and curate a whole lot of information through the last few years of my training in resilience and personal leadership, I will put together specific outtakes for you that I do hope will help. I hope you're having a fantastic weekend wherever you are, despite not necessarily being able to do what you always do or what you would really love to do. I do hope that you're managing to have some fun and find some lightness and levity in this situation. See you soon.